Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear about a recent court ruling on the Clean Water Act. Lynn and Ben have a discussion on management practices to think about for corn and soybeans dependent upon Mother Nature. And stick around for some corny jokes.
Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we got Turk, Lynn, and myself. And today we are going to start off with Turk. We have some industry updates, some stuff going on in the news. What do we got?
Some interesting things happened in the courts this week. The Supreme Court ruling came down and reversed the lower courts, or the Ninth Circuit Court's ruling on waters of the U.S. in a case that was out in western, or in out east or out west someplace. But regardless, the justices came down and completely upset the Clean Waters Act and made it that it has to be a continuous surface connection to qualify under the government control or government regulations. And so basically any wetland that is not directly connected to a larger body of water is then therefore not under the control of the Waters of the U.S. Act, Clean Water Act now. So big change. It's going to make a lot of changes in all the decisions that EPA makes when it comes to wetlands and control and regulations and all of that. The other one that came in was the Arizona, the plaintiffs in the dicamba lawsuit on the registration of the dicamba. The plaintiff asked for a summary judgment, and if that's granted, then they ask for summary judgment to vacate. And so if that's granted, it'll be just like it was the last time when the Ninth Circuit Court ruled in all over top of all dicamba over top applications were banned from that day on. And so if this summary judgment is granted, it'll be the same case. That's what they're asking for, is to vacate.
There was some speculation in that article too, wasn't there, that like if this did go through and having to go through all of the correct procedures, that it could be 2030 by the time they get a registration reapproved.
As far as the EPA trying to re-register dicamba, again, if this court vacates the dicamba overtop applications, it's probably not going to happen again in the EPA.
So, speculating, when will that decision be made?
It's hard to tell. I mean, they asked for a summary judgment. Even if they get the summary judgment, there would still be an appeal probably possible. But again, we're running out of time. And so it'll be interesting to see if there is an appeal on this into the Ninth Circuit Court, which we know the Ninth Circuit Court's already ruled on this once, and I don't think it's going to be any friendlier there.
Right. So going back to the previous story, how does that affect our growers and, like, in the short term for the waters of the U.S.? How does that affect growers?
Well, I mean, it's going to be what they can do with that wetland. The case that was at hand was he wanted to build on it or do something different with it, and they said, no, you cannot do anything with that because we control that. The federal government controls that, and you can't touch it. You can't do anything with it. So this reversed that ruling, and now he wanted to build a condo on the area, and now he can proceed with that.
Gotcha. So this ties back into 2008's Waters of the U.S. under the Obama administration, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So basically they're limiting their outreach that the EPA can dictate and control.
It's, I guess the simpler term would be, a wetland versus a pothole has kind of been something I've seen on the backside of it is what is an actual wetland and what is just, here locally we call them buffalo wallers or a pothole.
So the fact that it's designated as a wetland, this ruling probably doesn't change any of that, but it does change on whether the Corps of Engineers has control in telling you what you can do and can't. that's what it changes, whether it's navigable waters of the U.S. And so it's a completely different body of people telling you, more local than it is federal.
Always good to keep us updated on what's going on, and those two are two things that are definitely pressing at the top of guys' minds.
Yeah, it's going to be a game changer. It's going to completely upset the apple cart in the FSA office and the NRCS office.
Gotcha. Well, stay tuned on both of those topics. Lynn, where are we at staging currently? You've kind of been traveling and looking out at stuff. Where are we staging on corn, soybeans, and wheat? And what's at the top of your mind when you're thinking about what growers are doing right now?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I had, as I'm driving across this week, I went out to Illinois and took a look at northern Illinois on some replants and just looked at some crops. It's really a unique year in the sense that from my personal operation and stuff out west of West Point here, you drive all the way over to Illinois, we're all kind of in the same realm as far as staging goes. And usually it seems like we're kind of, somewhere has a quick start and someone's lagging behind, but basically all across 74, up 57, we're all kind of in the same realm, short of the places that, got drowned out and had a little bit of a replant as that goes. But, the biggest thing right now I'm having discussions with is making sure that we don't get away from the corn if you're going to side dress. We're maxing our GDUs for, I would say, most of the Mershman seeds growing area. Just don't let that corn get too far ahead of you when it comes to that. And then, we're looking at some escapes, maybe on some pre's or lack of rain. The pre's aren't getting activated, so we're going to start seeing, already seeing some little water hemp kind of poke through. And when I look at that, you probably could have a different opinion, but we're in that really critical stage right now with corn where we're nearing that V5, V6, V7 stage where we're determining the ears around, and we have an opportunity. We're off to a great start. Just want to be really careful not to do things to stress that plant out while we're in this critical period and looking at a big yield. So we're kind of looking at, can we maybe wait just a little bit? Are our pre's still holding on? Is our weed pressure? Can we get through this stage and maybe have, one shot, get to canopy, we'll be canopy pretty quick. But at the same token, you don't want that weed pressure to get too far ahead of you. And then, on the side dress, we're looking at, most guys I think are being a little more proactive than reactive. Things that probably stick out to me right now with no rain in the forecast is guys that are using coultered or knife machines probably are not in a bad spot. If you're using Y drops or going to top dress, I'm getting a little bit concerned that we're not getting enough moisture to maybe get that to where we need to. I would say more so on the top dress side of stuff. I think on Y drops, you're putting it right on the root. Most of the time it works out pretty well, but definitely on top dress, I'm getting a little bit concerned by the lack of the 10-day forecast of nothing is coming on that pike. So as always, be very multiple or variable in your operation to be able to pivot as Mother Nature dictates how we go here. We catch some rain, you're going to be able to be just fine. On the bean side of stuff, I'd say for the most part, things are looking...
Let me back you up just a minute there too. So with not having any rain in the forecast, for what we know for sure is probably a 10-day.
Correct.
7 to 10 day. Are you adding a urease inhibitor with your liquid, or are you adding a stabilizer with your dry to combat both of those things? 'Cause I think that right there, spending an extra $5, $6, $7, whatever that is per acre, I'm doing it in my situation to make sure that, yes, even though you are putting it in a coulter or in a top dress situation, I'm a little bit concerned that, what's that time period that you're looking at when it's dry and how much you think you lose when you're laying stuff on top.
Correct. That's one of those, I think it is ultimately the grower has to make that decision, but if we're going to make the recommendation, by all means make that. And I would say that most of our who we talk to, most of the guys are using something of that form, or they're adding maybe using ATS in with their liquid to use that sulfur component to get a what's the word I'm looking for? Stabilizer. Using sulfur as a stabilizer with their 32. So by all means, definitely recommend it. Talking with Chase and Logistics, they were side dressing last night on their personal acres and had to go just a little bit deeper to get into moisture. So that's on a coultered machine. So even the coulter guys you're not immune to the same issues. We just have to make sure that we keep it in the game. We're putting it where we want it. It still has to get that root interception, especially on the, if you're going between the rows, we got to get that root interception. So we're still a little ways off to get to that point. Granted, we're maxing GDUs and getting a lot of growth, but it's not like it's on a wide drop where it's right over the top. We're getting instantaneous diffusion, I guess. It would be diffusion, right?
Yep.
On that one. Instantaneous diffusion where it's right there where the plant can take it up. We have to give it a little bit of time for that interception. So by all means, yes. I mean, that would be the recommendation. And really, I think we're getting to the point where retailers, that's probably the default rather than the exception. So as far as time-wise goes, putting it out there, I think that's just kind of dependent on your weather situation. Talking with Bill Wilkinson, he still has P and K that was put on no-till ground that still hasn't dissolved. So most of the urea type products, though, seem like they break down very, very quickly
once they get moisture.
So it's just a matter of when you can predict the moisture, then you would be good to go. But we don't want to miss those critical stages in getting nitrogen and then running into deficiencies and then trying to play catch up, because we just don't know what comes after that. But the nice part is we're early enough, we can manage our way through it, though.
Correct. No, I absolutely agree. I think stabilizers are key right now, and I am probably staying away from dry as best as possible, because really you have 2 days before you start losing something. And whether you call it 10 pounds a day after that, if that's kind of on the extreme side, I'm definitely backing away from the dries a little bit until we know that we have something in the forecast that's more concrete than a hope and a prayer at this point.
And what's our enemy right now on the dry stuff is actually our friend on the mineralization side. Right now with the heat, we're getting just phenomenal organic matter breakdown or mineralization. So, our nitrogen use efficiency scores, I guess if we want to call it that, for this year could be extremely well as we're plowing through that. So just kind of keep that in mind too as we're going through. We're getting maybe an extra gear from the organic matter that typically maybe we didn't get later in the season. So I think this year is one where if your corn is looking really well, keep an eye on your nitrogen throughout the growing season and make sure you don't run out of gas later than what you would normally run out of gas with.
I completely agree. Right now, if we had a choice in our growing region right here, if we had a choice to be dry the end of May going into the first half of June, I'd rather be dry and then let the rains pick back up, because we have excellent nitrogen mineralization. You've already talked about that. From a soybean standpoint, the soybeans don't hit their ugly duckling stage where you get 2.5, 3, 4 inches of moisture and the nodulization shuts down because there's no oxygen left in the soil. So you're going to be picking up some extra things that are the silent boosts of yield where, you talk about, well, where did all this come from? I'm circling the calendar right now and saying, okay, this is a pretty good portion. This is a good time for us where we're letting the roots get rooted down deeper. We're letting nodulization happen. So anything else? Where were you at on beans?
Beans are, I would say for the most part, we're once again traveling all around. Most of the beans in the area seems like they were all planted within a 2-week window. Maybe a little bit of issues with out east with ponding, some really, really big rain events, some hail as well. Stuff that, not the beans' fault. They can only survive so long without oxygen. But anywhere from emergence to probably knocking on the door of V3 in some spots would probably catch the bulk of the average. You kind of made me laugh there a little bit with the ugly duckling stage. It seems like this year we didn't have that. And I think part of it is where we look at, we were able to metabolize the herbicide either very, very quickly, or it did its job. It did it on pre-emerge, where years in past we had been either super wet or super dry, and just wasn't able to metabolize that until after emergence, and beans just kind of look a little bit ugly, and they're not growing, and they're trying to fight through all that. This year, I don't see anything with that on one field of Kennedys I looked at already. They're already doing things that we expect Kennedys to do. They're that off green colored. Mm-hmm. They're just very, very large. Trifoliate's already coming out, so Kennedys are already in mid-season form, so that's really exciting. Optically, maybe not exciting, because you look at it and like, oh my goodness, what's up with those beans? Like, no, those are just Kennedys. That's their colors. So that makes me really excited, because if we're to that stage, we're setting ourselves up for a very, very productive vegetative stage, and it'd just be up to management practices and Mother Nature to help us out once we hit the reproductive stage of the soybeans.
That gets us kind of into talking posting on corn and soybeans. We can take a look at beans first. With having this dry weather, that adds the whole conversation of the weeds are going to be a little bit harder to kill if you're not attacking the smallest weeds when they're 1 inch or 2 inches tall. So if you go back to a Scott Youngman episode, the Enlist field specialist, where he talks about, okay, we want to be maxing our rates out at a quart of Enlist 1. We want to make sure we're definitely using that. We're using at least 15 gallon of water with the correct pressure settings. We want to have either a non-ionic surfactant if we really think that the weeds are starting to get, they're starting to harden off, or they're getting that waxy cuticle built up. We want to be switching from a 90% non-ionic to probably one of the crop oils, whether it's methylated seed oil or crop oil or something to that extent, to really heat that mix up. Because as I see this dry period continuing, the weeds are going to be harder to kill. And then it's a matter of, okay, what weed species do I have out there? Do I have more of a water hemp lean, where I can handle it with Enlist and Roundup, or do I have more mare's tail and things that are a little bit harder to kill that Enlist doesn't have quite as good of efficacy against? I'm switching over and buying the Liberty. The Liberty's a little bit easier to choke down this year. The prices of all of the chems have came down, but an Enlist 1 Liberty application at 20 gallon per acre, at least 32 ounces of Liberty, if not 40 ounces of Liberty, depending on the size of the weeds you're trying to kill. Those are some of the things that are starting to track in my mind, because our pre's are just starting to break. The beans are getting to a stage where canopy looks fairly favorable. Things are tracking along the way they're supposed to track. AMS is also in the tank at 3 pounds. Had a grower talking that he uses a gallon of 32 instead of AMS, and that heats the program up nicely. So there's a couple different directions that we can go there, but making sure that you have at least a 3 pound equivalent. If you're using a liquid AMS style product, you want at least the 3 pound dry AMS equivalent. So some of those products, when you look at, the use rate, it's doubling that use rate to get to the 3 pound of dry AMS. So I'm thinking about bean posts, corn posts. I also like your conversation about we're at the V5, V6 time frame. Going out there, hoping that you had your pre's put on previously, going out there with a real hot mix of something, try to avoid that time frame. Try to get in and post those corn plants before that time frame if you can, because I was listening to a podcast this past week where they were talking about, there could be 5 to 10 bushel on the table if you stress that corn plant at that time, that you don't even think about, because it's getting close to canopy, got to keep moving. You don't want that corn plant to metabolize something to take it from 18 to 16 or 20 to 18 rows around. You'll be able to see that at the butt of the plant this coming fall, where you got 20 kernels set all the way around. Well, why did it pinch itself down to 18 or 16 or 14 or whatever that number is? Why did we go from that wide to the narrow? Well, that by itself right there could be your herbicide application and your timing on that. So trying to get ahead of that at that V4 application could reduce that. It's not phantom loss, but it's a loss that you don't necessarily see, because you don't think you're stressing the plant, but you actually are stressing the plant.
And keep in mind that because of the cool weather we've had this spring, a 4-inch plant is further along this year because it's shorter. It didn't stretch.
Correct. Yep, and you got to go back to that's we've had that conversation with certain growers before, where he sprayed a 12-inch tall corn plant with 2,4-D because that's what the label allowed for a traditional hybrid. Well, that 12-inch plant was actually at V7. It was just real tight nodes stacked, and you don't want to be stressing that plant. Exactly to your thought there, Turk. I completely agree. So. Wheat and wheat fungicide timing for the guys up to the north is another thing. They're a little bit further behind us. It seems like Interstate 80 and north definitely didn't get the warm up that we got down here, so there's going to be some fungicide applications happening then. Flowering is the ideal time to be hitting that at that Feeks 10.5.1. As we go from here in south, pollination is finished on wheat. Now we're in the rider out, hope for cooler nights, hope for cooler days, hope for a couple shots of rain to finish the wheat crop off. But I think we have a very, very nice wheat crop coming in. And I guess the other thing that I had written down here is scouting. We just got to continually keep on scouting because there are corn cutworms that are out there right now and armyworms that
and
can be
definitely
feeding on plants.
Alfalfa to make sure you're checking for your aphids and your alfalfa weevil larvae. They have locally, we've seen them. So if they're out and about, and it seems like they're a little bit earlier this year too. So don't think that you're immune just because the calendar says that that it's not possible. And back again, I mean, bugs are the same way. They've had the growing degree units to go through their processes. So they're ahead of schedule just like the crops are.
Correct.
And we're seeing lightning bugs, so we know the rootworms are out there too.
I have not seen lightning bugs yet, but that's a good thing to pick up. So explain that a little bit.
Well, the same amount of heat units that it takes to get a lightning bug to hatch and come out, and so you can see them, is the same amount it takes for corn rootworms. And so we've been seeing lightning bugs for probably 3 or 4 days.
So, yep, now is the time to get out and start looking for those little beetles and getting ready for taking notes for changing plans for next year already, if you're in corn-on-corn situation for sure. So, anything else on your guys' mind?
I rambled enough.
Well, I didn't have to do any extra work because Joe gave me the corny joke for the day. Actually, a couple of them, and we got these passed on by one of our sales managers, Bill Wilkinson's kids. So, if I can't take the credit or the criticism in this individual instance. So, the first one here is: did you know that the government has actually outlawed round bales? Turns out they don't give cows a square meal. Yeah, that's pretty timely. You know, everybody talks about nutrition and all that fun stuff there. And did you know that what happens when your car gets scared? You know, cars have emotions too. You know, like Herbie the love bug. You know, what happens when cars? What happens when cars get scared? They have breakdowns, like mental breakdowns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
2 good ones there from the
Herbie
call-ins.
the love bug.
Herbie the love bug.
Huh.
You know.
I didn't know they had emotions, Ben.
Yeah, well, you just got to watch TV, too.
I've never seen Herbie the Love Bug.
There you go. So we're going to close it out. We thank everybody this week for watching, and stay tuned for next week. We will probably be finishing out our area sales manager with Bill Hosfelt and his Western Iowa update. We also want to thank all of our service men and women and the ones that we have lost to fight for their freedom in this country. You know, Memorial Day is this coming Monday, and we want to keep all of those people in mind, and we want to make sure everybody has a safe and fun weekend here, remembering why we have the freedoms that we have in this country and the blessings that we do. So happy Memorial Day to everyone out there, and we will see you next week.